So here's a first. I am reversing back down the carriageway along with the rest of the traffic. I came to a standstill and sat there for about 2.5 hours, not moved an inch. And highway maintenance arrive and start backing everyone back down. It's now nearly midnight and I was going to be stopping at about 10:30 and I got in this traffic at 10 o'clock. So I'm ready for bed and I'm about to take a massive detour. Italy is cursed. Well, now that I've stopped, I'll have a little rant. The driving standard here is terrible. It's not the first time I've driven through Italy, and it was a bit of a bump in the road last time. My journey took about 5 hours longer than it should have done. And I don't just want to bash Italy. Their country does have it all. The Alps, all the way down to the Med. So much beautiful land. And their food's amazing. I just wish they'd take some time away from pizza and pasta to learn how to bloody drive, because it keeps my road trips up. It's also kind of ironic given that they've got the best supercars in the world. Anyway, rant over. So I'm finally here in Ancona, northern Italy, ready to get my ferry to Greece. And the weather has been appalling. It has not stopped raining the entire way. And so while I am here waiting, I thought I'd give a little reflection on Dan's elephant. Why I think things like that is what's made him so successful as a base jumper. Dan said to me off camera that base jumping is a series of good decisions. The decision to not jump is not always the best decision, but it's never the worst, because you just cannot be wrong in base jumping. Why is his elephant so key in his success? To me, my understanding of it, and I'm not a psychologist, but I can see the psychology there and why it helps so much. It's the unburdening of personal responsibility and confirmation bias as well. We need systems in place to check ourselves. The elephant is a perfect thing for that, which unburdens his decision making, because when it's just you,
I tend to do a lot of solo jumps.
You take on the burden of responsibility for decision making. So if you choose not to jump, you beat yourself up about it.
If he says it's no go, we climb down.
So what happens is Dan ends up not suffering from confirmation bias, because the elephant, who has to give a second opinion and authorise the jump, which is quite hilarious but also really effective, makes him play devil's advocate with himself.
Always good to have a second opinion.
And confirmation bias is so strong, I can imagine that, especially in base jumping, where you might have invested a lot of time and effort, drive all that distance, climb that hill, climb that ladder to get to the top, and then have to walk back down. And the easiest thing to do is to convince yourself that it's not as bad as you think. Quite a curious place to be when your life is on the line with it. And it makes me think about what exactly I could implement to second guess myself with my decision making around business, life, everything.
And as I boarded the ferry ready to sail over to Greece, I did wonder, if I had my own cooler shaker, would my next stop be a car garage?
So I suppose I'll give a quick update on my second delay of this road trip. At this time it is because of the Land Rover, although it's an oversight on my part, at least for one of the things. So as you can see from the wheels, it's covered in dust, rusty dust. The brakes are metal on metal. Now this only just happened as I was getting into Ancona, Italy, to jump on a ferry, and I got on the ferry anyway and then got straight to a garage as soon as I got to Greece. It's going to get new discs on the back and pads, of course. So new discs and pads, waiting on that, taking a couple of days for parts. And the second thing I'm going to be fixing myself, which is a pretty straightforward job and a common one for Land Rovers, or at least this model, which is this here. So this is the thermostat water housing, I think. I've had to remove this part, which didn't take 5 minutes. So once that's out of the way, I can access this. And this part's on order with my brake discs and pads. And I'm going to change this myself. It's fairly straightforward. It's only 4 bolts and then disconnect the pipes. So after that, we hopefully won't have a coolant leak, which had developed. I was this close to buying a thermostat housing as a spare part for the trip, and because of the wait on eBay, I'd left it too late and it would have arrived past the point that I wanted to set off, so I didn't end up taking it with me. So that's my second stop of the trip, where I'm laying over unplanned. This was one of my favourite cars. That's a 2.5 litre V6 turbo Alfa Romeo. It's a car that I didn't own for very long. I had a 159 in black, but it was my favourite car, without a doubt. The most car person car I've ever owned. And they've got everything here. They're literally fixing everything. There's an old Merc here, probably done about 1 million miles. There's newer cars. There's loads of camper vans and stuff. And all I need them to do is discs and brakes, which I could have done before I left. So that's the nice new part going on. Here's the old one. I'll be taking the old one with me just because it was only a minor coolant leak, and to be honest, I wouldn't have done this until I got to Turkey, losing about 500 mil every 5 hours, which is about the stop frequency that I was doing anyway. It was only €40 and it's an aftermarket part, which I'm not thrilled about, because you shouldn't really be using aftermarkets on these. Much better just to stay to a genuine Land Rover. But I'll be taking this part with me just in case, and then if anything goes completely wrong with that, at least I can swap this back out and I know I'm back to just having to top up the coolant every 5 hours or so with motorway driving.
All that sorted and out of the way, and the Landy was back on the road and we were on our way.
So that's me at the car park to Mount Olympus. Time for a quick map recce. So there's an information board at the start of the trail. I'm not actually taking a map with me, but I am taking a compass. You should really carry one if you're going out and stuff like this. It's 3,000 metres to the peak, just over twice as big as anything in the UK, and it's a marked trail all the way up, which I'm going to be following, and I'll be heading north for all of it until I hit this point. It's a stopover point for an overnight. It will look like this: Spilios Agapitos, some wacky Greek names. It's recommended that you overnight here and then make a push for the summit, which is going to be Scala Summit. Actually looks like it goes from Scala up to the Mykitas, which I believe is nose or top. I'll know when I get up there because I'll be able to visually see. But that's supposed to be a 2-day hike. 1 day to the overnight, early summit, and then straight back down. If you're into your hiking, fishing, climbing, anything outdoors, then you need to get yourself something like this. It's a pocket rocket, or even better, a jet boil. You don't even have to take it with you in your kit. You can just use it before you set off, whatever it is, so that you start nice and warm. Now, there once was a time where I didn't drink a lot of coffee. I don't know exactly when it was, but at some point in time, I had proper coffee. And once you have proper coffee, there's no going back to instant. And that causes some problems, because good coffee is not convenient.
If you're where I am now, Mount Olympus, then there's no coffee shops around here or anywhere nearby. So when I'm about to start my hike in the morning, how can I get a good coffee? And that's where coffee bags come in. Now these things are doing for coffee what slicing did for bread. So when I'm getting up in the morning and I'm not a morning person, all I've got to think about is to boil water and pour it into my mug with this bag in it, and I get a 10 out of 10 brew. I've even got an idiot's guide on the back, so you just can't fuck it up. Honestly, these things have been a lifesaver for me. They just save on water, not having to wash anything except your mug. If you've not guessed already, I'm of course talking about Contact Coffee, my second chat for sponsors about this channel. And being a business owner myself, I know the devil is in the detail, and their packaging and branding is something to be inspired. And if you look on the inside of the lid, printed are 2 slate cards for military parachuting. They of course do other coffee, which I've got here after hours. This is ground coffee, which I use for my mocha pot when I treat myself to that occasionally, when I can be arsed and when I've got plenty of water. And another thing that I absolutely love with their packaging, if you can see that there, that's contour lines from a map, which looks great, and it's an awesome hat tip to the most important foundational skill any soldier could have. And given that they're a military coffee company, that's a really nice touch. So the time is now 04:31 and I'm stepping off. The car park's absolutely dead. There are some people sleeping outside in sleeping bags at the start of the trail, so maybe they've not got a car camper to sleep in, unlike me. The stars are out, it looks absolutely stunning. But I'm going to get to it and see you when it's light. Hello mate. Come on. Been met with a guide to bring me into camp. This map looks a little bit more worn out from people just fingering it all the way up to the summit. So I've just gone through the stopover point, the mountain hut, and it was a hive of activity. There was tents everywhere and people packing up, getting ready to go, or getting ready for breakfast anyway. Didn't see anyone with their boots on, everyone's still in flip-flops. So I was planning originally to stop there, given that it's so busy. I really don't want to be up the mountain with loads of people. We get this done early, so I'll push through. I can see everything, you probably can't on the camera, but it's absolutely stunning. See all the way down to the sea, and I can still hear the fucking hikers now down there gobbing off. Sound travels really far when it's like this. I should probably talk about why I'm doing this, and this is going to be my pilgrimage. So I'm not a religious man, but I'm a believer in a bit of good Greek philosophy, hence this being my pilgrimage up to Mount Olympus. I know that's more like Greek mythology, but I feel like you can mess it too and make it more interesting. Why not? In fact, I like Greek philosophy so much that I think it should be the modern man's doctrine. And what's so good about Greek philosophy is that Socrates didn't need to exist. It doesn't matter whether he existed or not. It's man-made. So even if Socrates didn't exist, the words are still there. Somebody has still said them. And that's where the value is to me. All those years ago, these good ideas were about way back then, and we need them now more than ever. With
social media nowadays, kind of ironic given what I'm doing. It's more difficult to be happy and you've got to try a bit harder. Greek philosophy is a great, or it's a good reference to go back to when you feel like you're death scrolling a bit too much on Instagram. Just as I've been talking, the sun is just starting to crack through the clouds. Just starting to see it come up now. See the rest of the mountain. Absolutely brilliant view. Amazing views.
I'd go as far as to say this was probably the most rewarding part of this hike. After you go through the stopover hut, you start to climb out of the trees and onto this low spur where things start to feel a bit more serious. The terrain gets a bit steeper, the views get a bit better, and you start to feel like the summit isn't too far away. The path goes round the ridge, this low ridge line, and into a bowl.
Just turning 8 o'clock, and that set off at just after 4:30. It took me 3.5 hours to get to this point, and I'm not too far off, to be honest. I think maybe an hour and I'll be at the summit. Might even be back in the van by 1 o'clock. Didn't call it a van, it's a Land Rover. But we're getting there. I've just come out of this bowl and you come up onto this ridge line that goes up to the summit, and the view from here I'm now very quickly being caught up by a massive snake of other hikers. I want to crack on, hit the summit before it gets too busy, and the cloud is also starting to come in, which does add to the drama of the landscape. So I'm up and out of that ridge, and it is getting busy up here now. Coming across, I believe this is Scala Peak, and then it's a steep drop back down to then go up and onto the actual peak of Mount Olympus, which looks pretty busy given that there was no one in front of me all the way up here, and then I got up here and it's full of people at the top. Never mind.
Now from Scala Peak, this is where the E4 trail continues around the ridgeline and doesn't actually go up to Mount Olympus Peak itself. So the drop down off Scala Peak is its own tricky path, which is a very tough scramble. There's red and yellow painted guidelines that help you navigate your way across the ridge, and there's also bolts in places. Now, I don't think that this really needs roping up. It might need to be roped in the winter when conditions are icy and snowy. Looking back, here's Scala, and you can see where I've come from. But I actually think these fixings are more for mountain rescue, to be able to casualty evacuate any injured persons off this ridge. A rolled ankle up here and you're really going to struggle to get off this mountain, particularly in this section. But the climb's pretty much over by now, and all I've got left to do is get up to the summit and sign the book. The book is conveniently placed right on the trig point, which is 2,918 metres and the highest point in Greece.
Back off the ridge and into the bowl. I'm just going to boot it back down, get back best speed now. It's getting pretty busy up here, and I'm ready to go back for a wash in a nice river.
I did hit traffic on the way back down, not as you'd expect, but as I come into the overnight, the mules that are used to resupply the overnight hut locations were just setting off on their way back down. It was some welcome company though, and there was a nice little reward waiting for me at the end.
Some much needed mountain spring water. That's a fitting end. I beat them down by about 5 minutes. So the time is now 1:30. So 4:30 to 1:30. It's 9 hours. I can see why people do it in 2 days. It would be more comfortable with a stopover. Certainly if you're going for the summit and you're not very fit. To me that was like a really long Snowdon, to compare it to anything in the UK. If you know the pig track that goes up to the lake at Mount Snowdon in Wales, then that is what the first part's like. Hit the stay over for the night. If you're just pushing past it, you haven't got too much further to go from there. It's not bad going up until the point where you hit the first peak, where then you then look across and you've got to cross the ridge. From there, that ridge is a bit of a scramble. It's not very long, but it's quite exposed. To compare it again, something in the UK like Cribgoch in Wales, but shorter. I'm going to throw a dry t-shirt on now and
be sure to check back in for what will be my final part.